Good to go?
Yes.
All right, everyone. My name is Dave King. Some of you guys have seen me. I'm the job placement director for online. I work with Tyler and Aaron. Today I want to talk about transforming your GitHub projects. A lot of times when we get students coming through the program, we get a chance to look at their GitHubs, and there's a lot of opportunity here to make your GitHub look a lot more presentable to both employers as well as other colleagues. So this is just going to kind of cover some do's and don'ts, as well as we're going to dive a little deep into Readmes, things like that, of best practices, making these look amazing. I apologize about my voice. I'm kind of getting over a little cold. So if you guys need me to repeat anything or you don't understand what I'm saying, please feel free to just raise your hand, and I have no problem going a little deeper into it. This is expected to last about 30 minutes, but as we go along, feel free to ask questions. I have no problem stopping and answering questions. So I'm just going to dive right in. So today we're going to talk a little bit about activity. We're going to go over what your GitHub photos should be, some do's and don'ts, your bio and your title, repo naming convention. We'll go into that a little bit more. README files. We'll have some final questions, and then I've got links at the end on everything, all the resources I've used in this, and then we'll make sure this slide is available for anyone who wants to view it later, so you can access all this information in the future. So things we're going to cover today, as I mentioned, GitHub activity. Why is this important? Your profile, layouts, READMEs, and just like I said, overall tips. Get your GitHub stand out to others or employers. So a little disclaimer: there's many ways to style your GitHub. We're just going to cover some of the most common methods. Things we're not going to cover today. We're not going to cover what is GitHub, how to use GitHub, how to use Git, definitions such as forks, things like that. We're not going to get into those. What's that?
You learned it in the beginning.
Yeah, everybody should have already learned this. This is just fine-tuning what you should either have up or just showing you why you should be having more up there. So we're going to go in a little bit about activity. So GitHub activity is defined by commits. So a commit is an individual change to a README file or set of files. This can be as small as making a change to a README file or uploading recent changes to your code. Commits are shown on a daily basis. Columns are days and rows are weeks. So for example, in the upper left corner, you see Mon. That above it would be Sunday, and it runs all the way through Saturday. So a week is there, and then you got the right another week, and then another right's another week. So it shows Monday through Friday how much you're committing. Boxes are colored darker as more commits are added to it for that day. So for example, if you have no commits, it'll be white. If you have one commit, it could be light green. And if you see as we get a little darker here, darker green could be 10, 15 commits. Usually when you highlight the mouse over it, it'll show exactly how many commits are for that day. So with that being said, it's advised you spread your commits out to show that you have more activity. And if you use GitHub as it's intended, you'll have plenty of commits already. So why is this so important? So your commits really show how active of a developer you are. It's one of the first things a hiring manager is going to look at when they pull up your page. They're going to see how often you've been committing, what days of the week you're working on things. So for example, when you guys finish your live project with the class, you need to continue coding. You can't just call it good and just assume, I'm going to go find work. Really quickly, you're going to start losing this knowledge. So this is a great way for employers to see how active of a developer you are, as well as how often you're developing. A lot of times I see people finish the C# course or the final project, and then there's weeks of no development, and they're looking for work, wondering why I'm not getting the responses I expected. It's because you're not looking as active as you should to an employer. So posting your commits is a good habit to form. This allows you to demonstrate that you've already had a VCS. I don't know if you guys remember its version control system. So there's multiple ones out there. We're just covering GitHub today. And again, this is a big plus for employers. So the next 3 slides we're going to look at, I want you to look at these as if you're an employer looking at them. There's no names on these. So this first one, so if we notice here, 0 contributions in the last year, it's all white. So when you see this activity bar below, what do you see? If I was an employer looking at this, the questions I might have would be, maybe does this person not use GitHub? Or maybe they don't even know how. maybe they aren't serious about being a developer because there's zero activity. When you see this one, what do you see? It looks like they've been active for a little while there, but since June, there's been no activity, and it's middle of October. Yes?
Probably maybe only doing some assignments, and once they graduate, they just don't give a darn.
And that's exactly right. And the whole purpose of what we're focused on today is making sure that you guys continue with your GitHub, posting stuff, staying active, because when you're looking for work, these are tools that employers look at to see what you've been doing. And here's the next one. So when we look at this one, this person's very active. They spend a lot of time in front of code. It's a good sign for a potential employer that this person's committed to using code. Now this is kind of the exception here. This person's done 3,000 contributions. This is I wanted to use this as a very high level exception here. You only need a few a week to make an impact. So just a couple dots a week, and it looks great. But when you have big blocks like here for a month or two, it's really going to make it look like you haven't been coding, or you stopped for a while. Maybe you went on vacation.
What exactly is a commit?
So I covered that a little bit ago. So basically, a commit is any sort of upload you commit to a. When you upload your GitHub to create a new repo. I'll go into a little bit more here. When you create a new repo and you upload your data to it, every time you update your version control, like save that instance, it uploads a new version of it. But also, it's really any changes you've made to those files counts as a commit. So really on activity, it's just an extension of how often you're coding and using your version control. The job placement department recommends that you should have a minimum of 3 commits per week and not all on the same day. I personally, I've been doing one commit a day for over a year now. And it's made a massive difference on my GitHub. It's green all the way across the board. It does take time, but really if you get into it and you start a project and you make some changes for maybe 20 minutes and you save it up, you're constantly getting activity every day. And remembering to keep your activity high will help reinforce this version control habit. Most companies out there in software development use a version control of some kind. So getting this habit established now is a great thing you can bring up in an interview that, hey, I've already established this habit of this with my GitHub. I'm really active. I'm using it all the time. And also, if you start this early in the boot camp, by the time you enter your job placement program, you already have a really nice long history of commits in your GitHub. And on the flip side, if you haven't been doing this, it's not too late to get started. I've seen people that haven't done anything for months, and then they all of a sudden, I talk to them and they really get started and they're doing 4 and 5 commits, and it just kind of, it's a great way to say, hey, look, I didn't realize how important this was. Yes, Aaron.
So this also applies to people that are not in the boot camp as well. They can just start doing stuff on GitHub.
That's a great point. Yeah. This is just another way you can demonstrate your commitment to being a developer and demonstrating how often you're actually developing. Because otherwise, if you just keep it on your computer to yourself, an employer doesn't know how often you're actually developing software. It's just kind of pretty much to yourself at that point. We'll move forward here. I'm just going to get a drink of water real quick here. So yeah, this is a big way you can, employers can look at your code and see that you're serious about being a developer. Having a low or non-existent activity can potentially have a negative impact. We had another speaker 2 weeks ago. He said 50% of his hiring decision is based on your GitHub. So, that's word of mouth from an employer just 2 weeks ago we had here. There is a little trick to kind of get you started, to get a few commits early on. So editing Readme files, which we're going to cover later in this, they do show up as activity because you're modifying an existing file. So if once we finish this presentation, if in the next couple days, if you guys have time to start working on your GitHub, as you make changes to your READMEs, those are going to show activity. So I recommend not doing all of your corrections in one day. Spread it over a week or 2 weeks so that it looks like you have a lot more commitments. But be careful with this because it does show what files you've modified, and if that's all you've done is keep tweaking README files, it's not going to show any sort of development experience. But if you kind of trickle these in through as you're developing, it's going to really start showing a lot more activity very quickly for you. We're going to move on to the profile photo. So a good photo with a friendly smile can help employers and others make a connection to you. It doesn't have to be a professional photo like your LinkedIn. A photo is not required, but is considered good practice. And if you don't want to use a photo of yourself, you don't have to. Just something that captures your personality. Just make sure it's not crude or offensive or in bad taste. This next slide is a great example of what not to have in your GitHub. This is an actual GitHub that I found. Yes, it's funny, and I totally get that, but if you're trying to portray a professional developer image, this may not be the best side to show. We all have flaws. Just try not to highlight them. You can smile or do something else. Have fun, express yourself, but not at your own expense. So here's just an example of another site I found. This guy's a nice photo. He's smiling. There's nothing bad or anything wrong with this one. It shows a bit of his personality, and it keeps it clean and presentable. Any have questions on photos or anything yet?
Back on the GitHub, you were saying, how often do you?
I commit daily. Yeah, I've pretty much made the habit of at some point during the day I find time, whether it's on a break or I get home and I'm getting ready for bed. I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't done this yet.
Do you always find something to commit?
I've been really working a lot of side projects, or I write Android, so I have a project I've been working on for a while. So I just pull it up, I make some changes to it. I'm not like filling in one word. I'm actually making physical changes, adding some things onto the project, and then I'll commit it up and I'll put notes on it so that it looks like I actually did work, which I did. But it also keeps my activity flowing. Okay, let's move forward. So we're going to move on to the profile and general information. So make sure your name is spelled correctly. It's funny, of all the GitHub pages I've seen there's times where people are so quick to put their GitHub site together that their name is either not spelled properly or it's shortened or they're putting an alias. If somebody's pulling up your GitHub on your resume and it doesn't have your name, they don't know if it's you or not. It could be a bogus site or something. Also, make sure your bio includes what your development focus is on, whether that's .NET, Python, mobile developer, front-end developer. So I'll show you an example here of my GitHub and what we're referring to. So this just has my name, mobile developer with a passion for Android development. It's very short. It's very easy. It's nothing too fancy. Clean photo. Does that make sense for everybody? Yeah. Okay. Also, the next thing, it's a really big one, especially when you're looking for work. Make sure you've selected the available for hire in your job profile section. This is there's actually a way to recruit people directly from GitHub. So this link in your job profile. So if you go here and you go profile. What's going on here? Okay. I'll come back to that. There is a link all the way at the bottom when you go into your profile that states available for hire. And it's a little checkbox. It's all the way at the bottom, and make sure that that's checked so that employers, maybe they're on GitHub seeking for developers. It's just another way for you to get exposure. Also, if you haven't already, I know this is in the course to do this, but if you haven't already, make sure your GitHub is a custom name on the account page. Make it short and keep it professional. This link will eventually go on your resume. So it shouldn't be like Jim2975 XY, some long set of characters. For example, mine is SWDevDave. It's just short, easy for me to remember, and it makes a very nice short URL. Let's see here. So repo naming convention. This is another really big one that I see a lot of people struggle with. So GitHub refers to a repository as a repo for short. And it's basically a storage space where you can access your projects and files. I'm sure everybody here that's been through VCS knows what a repo is. But again, we have some people that may not have gone through a GitHub program. The name should be readable and created in a manner that's consistent with what the project is about. So you cannot use spaces between your name. So for example, I have my first repo right here. So dashes are hyphens are the typical way of doing it, but you can also do underscores and even periods if you choose to do so. But the most common way of doing this is with the hyphens. So for example, this is one I found on a student's GitHub just a few days ago. So if you notice at the very end, it's got these zeros attached to it. So for me, this is a giveaway that the time wasn't taken to change the name, or it was just copied from somewhere. So personalize it. Change it to Lab 1 IDE Bootcamp Prep or something like that. Make it personable, that when somebody reads it, they know what this means. Because all these zeros on here, it just looks copied and pasted. It doesn't look professional. And another really big thing that I like to tell people too is when you're working on your repos, think of repos as like chapters in your GitHub book. So these are titles to individual chapters of what your development is. So maybe you did a project for C# or what's the name of that project? And then inside you have all your code. So that when somebody clicks on it, they know what they're about to open. So maybe it's like, I think there's a blackjack program. So you could say C# blackjack or something like that. And then when they open it up inside there, they're going to be able to read the code and they'll be able to see the README with all the details of what that is, such as the body of what's in the chapter. Am I moving too fast or is everybody good so far? Yeah? Okay. README files. This is probably the biggest area of opportunity for students. Many times I see README files that have just like one sentence, like the Tech Academy or Pizza Demo, and it doesn't go into details of what it is. So the file, the necessary parts of why we need the README file is to name the project, the overview of what's the project about, if there's some sort of configuration or installation instructions that need to happen, your copywriting and licensing information, if there's any bugs with the software, troubleshooting. So maybe you've created some sort of software that only works on a certain version of Windows, or maybe you've done a Python project and it only works on Python 2.7 versus not Python 3. Things like that you'd want to include it there. Credits and acknowledgments. Maybe you worked on this with a whole group of other students and you want to make sure that they're all getting credit for it as well. So that's another great spot to add it there. And changelog. Changelogs are fantastic. I myself wish I was a little better on the changelogs, but you can do version number 2.1 or 1.5b or something like that, and state what changes you've made since the last version. So not spending time on these can severely hurt your profile.
Question.
Yes.
If you have multiple folders in your repository and they're each for different exercises, how would the changelog work there?
I would personally extract them out and make them individual. There's no limit on the amount of repositories you can have. And I know this sounds like a lot of
Because
work.
we're told to have one for basic and one for advanced, like C#, one for each, but then you've got
Multiple projects in each.
exercises. Right.
And in that case, if you really wanted to keep the three, just inside the README, go into great detail of, if you need to make 3 separate READMEs inside that, break. See, when you get that much content, you're really overloading it, and you really need to break it up. Really, VCS, this should be used as the repo should be used as an individual project commit. It shouldn't really be all jumbled up into 5 different commits. So if you're using this properly, so I don't know how many of you are in like Visual Studio, but Visual Studio actually has GitHub integrated in, and when you're working on that project, you can create a repo for that and upload it as you're going on that same project. And then when you start a new project, it's a new repo, and you're starting a new project. So think of like we'll use eBay, for example. I know they're not going to post it because it's not a public thing, but imagine if eBay posted all of their different platforms all in one repo. How difficult that would be to read and understand. So
we've got one for basic and one for advanced C#, for example.
Okay.
And they tell us in the course to put all the basic ones in the basic exercises in the first one and then the advanced ones in the second one.
A lot of things through the course. This is something we're working on, talking about, trying to figure a way to change. Initially, it's a great way to go, just to get you guys started so you're focusing on the coding. But as you go along, you're going to want to maintain your GitHub and modify it so that every repo is separated. Or if it's not separated, let's say you do want to just keep all the files because maybe you're developing something else and you want to really highlight that. You can pack them all in, but just remember you're not going to have the most amazing readmes because you can't have a file that's 20 pages long. No one's going to want to read that. So for an example like this one, Tech Academy projects is what's shown here. I've got the student's name and everything pulled out of this, but in here you've got, looks like a university and a 21 exercise game. These could each be pulled out separately and put into separate repo files. And then you can individually say 21 game exercise and break it down. What does it include? So I'll give you a little bit more, a better idea. So this is one of my README files. So on the right, it has a header. It talks about what type of tools I'm using, knowledge that's needed, experience, and it even includes screenshots. So when somebody looks at this, they could just scroll down to the screenshots and really quickly look, oh, well, what is this? And you can see what it's actually doing. It talks about details. I mean, it goes further down, but this is the most I could fit on the screen at once. So this is just a really clean layout compared to just this, right? And this is why we're bringing it up. This is this isn't make anybody feel bad about their GitHub. This is to highlight it and to make sure that as we're going through, we start using GitHub more and more because we are finding more and more employers are talking about this, and especially me going through and looking at the students' GitHub files when they send them to us. I see the names aren't right and a lot of things are copied and pasted, and it's just a general template that no time was taken, and there's been no commits for months, and then they want to put it on their resume, and at that point, is it hurting you or helping you at that point? At that point, you're really hurting yourself because you're showing you didn't take time to highlight what you're doing and showing your skills. The screenshots can be a little tough. However, I've seen plenty of GitHubs with people that do front-end developers, and they actually take a screenshot of what the homepage of something looks like, so that when somebody logs in, they can see it. Yes.
So is GitHub your portfolio, or do you have a portfolio in addition?
So your portfolio website's going to be a little different. This is allowing people to view your actual code. So really what you're doing is you're just summarizing on the right what all this code entails. Because a recruiter or somebody in HR, they're not going to go through and look, your C# code and look how you've written it. They have no knowledge of that. But if they click on your repo and they look in and they see all this, they can go, okay, this guy's done Android architecture components. He's done this. He's done this. They know that you've actually done these things in a project. Whereas if you just highlight on your resume, oh, I know C#, I know this, I know that, how can you prove that? But this gives you that ability to actually show it in work, and then if they want to dive into the code, they can just scroll up into one of the links and open it up. Does that help? Perfect. So we'll go on to the next one. So how do we edit the README files? If you notice on the very end of a README it says MD. There's actually multiple ways to make README files. The MD file is recommended, and what the MD means is markdown language. This allows you to edit your README file very much like an HTML file, but there's some subtle differences. So for example, if you see over here, you have H1, H2, H3, H4. This is what we normally put in styling for HTML or CSS. And in order to get the corresponding one, we would put pound signs in front of it. I'm going to actually show you guys a demo of it here in just a sec in action. So let's open that file real quick here. So, for example, the link for this is at the end on all the links for you guys to view. And this is not so easy to read, so I'm trying to zoom in over here. Okay. So it's just a sample of Markdown. So, for example, if we put a pound in front of here, see the size change difference? So, and there's a lot of different styling things. There's some cheat sheets that are also included at the end on how to change some of these things. But for example, like the word tables right here. So to get it italicized and bold, it has 3 little asterisks before and after. This has 1 asterisk after it, and it's just images. Or to make it bold, it's just 2. You know, this uses a little placeholder for 1 to make it a clickable link. So there's just some little differences with it. But as you notice, they put some bolds in here, and it's just styling it. You know, especially if you're a front-end developer, if you're not taking the time to do your GitHub page, you're really hurting yourself. Because you're all about styling and you know, making things look nice. So let's go back to presentation here. So the next one, oh, that's right. So we're going to look at the actual code. I'm using an example of one of mine. So I'm just going to put this one, it's fine. So here's what it really just looks like on the backside. So, you know, there's many ways to add links, but so for example, here's what it looks like when it's been all completed. Screenshots, licensing. You know, it's really clean and easy to read. And the code, go back, to do this isn't that hard. Yeah, I have 1 pound sign here to make that an H1. Here's an H2. Little dashes make the dots. So more dots here. You know, I've got down here, I've got links for images. One thing a lot of people don't realize is you can actually go inside the folder, take images, and just paste them right up in your GitHub, and then link those links right in your GitHub. So basically, I don't know, yeah, so I've got these images right here are just loaded right into the GitHub, and then I'm just referencing them directly off of the GitHub. So let's go back to there. So I'm just referencing them. A couple things about styling, some tips I learned along the way. I don't know if you guys remember what command this is. Do you remember what this is?
Space, right?
Exactly, yep. So there's a lot of commands that are, you know, concurrent with it. You know, if you look at this, I mean, if you look at this, how it's laid out, I mean, this looks almost just like HTML. It's really close. So adding spaces to it allows it to have spaces between images. Another thing, to get the row to move down, and this is covered on the cheat sheet, but I'll just let you guys know. If you do 2 white spaces at the end, so for example right here, if I wanted to add white space, I just add 2 spaces behind it, and it carries the enter key down. Any questions so far? Okay. Let's get back to that. So some things to avoid when you're making your README files. Avoid direct copy and paste of content without adding a heading, line breaks, or styling it up. Like I mentioned before, I see a lot of times where students will have a project in the course. They'll take all of the information of what's asked of them, and it'll be like 500 lines of code, of instructions, and they just have pasted it in there. And that's what they're considering the README file. It has no personal styling, no breakdown, no talking about maybe challenges you experienced or, you know, new things you added to it or updated it. It's just very generic, and on top of that, most of the time I even see the name of the project having the zeros or just some generic name that has shown no attention to detail on it. Another really big one I want to highlight too, Plagiarism, it is really easy. I'll show you again here. It's really easy to copy someone's GitHub code. Let's see, where is that at? Software app spaces, preview. That's not it. Let's go back in here. So you can click on raw, and I can literally copy this code and paste it anywhere I want. And this, this is a good way. This is basically all the code we were just looking at. This is a good way to copy a template and work off of it. So if you go on somebody's website and you're like, wow, that's a really amazing README, I think I could tweak that a little bit on my project. Or, hey, I like the way this guy styled this, this heading and these colors and all this stuff. But I don't, it's a little too advanced for me. You could copy some of this, make changes to it, of course, and really bring your GitHub page up really fast. I personally, that's how I got started. Was I found some repos that people had been posting stuff on, and I'm like, wow, this guy's got some really great README stuff. And so I kind of took what he had and I kind of spun it to my own.
Would you recommend going to someone else's? I mean, as long as if they put it on GitHub, then it's available to the general public. But would you recommend kind of maybe not exactly? I mean, definitely don't copy word for word on it, but kind of copy their thing and then make changes on it to suit your kind of way you want to format it.
Yeah, when you guys first get started, I would probably say use theirs as a template and kind of work off of it, because just looking at this, it may be difficult. I'm not a front-end person, I'm more of a back-end person. So I struggle with design and things like that. Content on a web page. I struggle with that kind of stuff. Whereas back-end stuff, I feel very comfortable. So for me, when I first was trying to style my GitHub, I was at a loss. I saw all these great articles on how to do it, but I had no base to go off of. So like I said, I found a few really good templates. I copied them. I started playing around with them. You can even drop them in the little editor I showed you earlier and just get a feel for it. Or if you noticed, GitHub has this really great feature where as you make changes, here, as you make changes, you can preview them live. So, let's say I want to change that to 2 to shrink it up. I can see what the differences are. And like any other VCS, it's going to show you where your changes are by highlighting them on here. It'll show red for removed, other colors for adding things. So yeah, I do feel, especially for you guys getting started, to save you a lot of time and headache just to get it started. Start looking at other people's GitHubs and start collecting some ideas on what you would like to make yours look like.
I was thinking the analogy is like a resume, because I used a template resume that I like, and
Mhm.
I put my own stuff on it.
Yeah, and I have to be careful with saying that this is like an online resume because, LinkedIn is technically what everybody's calling your online resume. This is really like your online coding resume, I guess you could call that. So, again, if you're not taking the time to put into this, you're really not showing that, you're going to use VCS as a developer. Maybe you're not developing as often as you should. There's just a lot of things that I feel that people are missing out on taking better advantage of their GitHub, and especially making it look as nice as it can. I'll tell you guys, the changes, when I create a new repo, it takes me no more than 5 minutes to create a repo file because I've done it enough times. This isn't going to take, the first time might take you an hour, fiddling around, kind of trying to understand things. Oh, this looks neat, that doesn't look, I don't like that. But as you start going on and you start doing this more and more, you guys will find that it doesn't take very long to get these files all updated and look really nice. Okay, let's go back. Don't use offensive language or slangs your reader might not understand. A lot of times we use acronyms. I would say be very careful with that because if you're getting somebody from a human resources recruiter or somebody who doesn't technically know all these terms, may not understand what you're talking about. Things like MVC, that's industry standard. I'd add that kind of stuff on there. but short words like let's say you're trying to squeeze out like what am I trying to say here? Shortening words like notation, like quick notation. Just make it like I said earlier, like in a chapter in a book, make it fully readable. Avoid grammar errors such as spelling and improper capitalizations. This is another really big one. If you guys have Word or anything like that, or Grammarly, I use Grammarly. It's a feature on Google Chrome. It'll help me make sure I'm spelling things right. Because there's nothing worse than having this beautiful README file and you have all this misspelling or these gigantic things in capitalization that shouldn't be. So again, just make it presentable. So there's many ways to make your GitHub look amazing. We looked at some of the basic suggestions today. The biggest thing I want you guys to take away is whatever way you guys decide to go with it, make sure you stand out and leave a good impression with anybody that views your GitHub. I just can't stress this enough, guys. I see these all the time from students submitting their GitHubs to me, and I just really feel this is something that you guys as a student can just commit a little bit of time to, and it'll make just a huge impact on your when you're looking for work. Any questions?
Is there a website you can go to that lists some suggestions on how to improve your GitHub account?
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit out there.
Yeah.
So let's see. Well, this one is this is one of the websites that I like. This kind of talks about what your README should look like. She gives some pointers on this one here. Talks about acknowledgments. So this is a background, project overview, configuration instructions. So this one's a really lengthy one. And it doesn't have to be this long, but just long enough where you're covering what's in it, so that the basic layman person can read it and kind of at least have a basic understanding of what's going on in the project.
Is that called medium.com?
Yeah, and this is one of the links at the end, and everybody will have access to that. Some other ones. Let's see where so that's the markdown. Here is a cheat sheet that'll go really into depth of all the things and how to use them. And this is actually right on GitHub. Somebody's got a link, and I've got a link, as you guys notice, on the links page. But this goes a deep dive into it. There's a ton of videos on YouTube on this, and like I said, there's a million ways to style your GitHub. These are just some of the more basic ones or more common ones that I've seen as using GitHub. There's ways of creating tables, like right here, coloring things. There's so much more that I just haven't even covered that you can really just go crazy on your GitHub and make it look amazing. Embedding YouTube videos. Just a whole bunch of really neat things. I've also included my GitHub in here. One thing I do recommend everybody, this isn't really in the scope of this, but since we have a little bit of time still, I'm going to cover. Where is that? So up top, it's going to show you repositories. Stars, followers, and following. This is something I would also make sure you're working on. Stars are things that you've highlighted, like a bookmark, for example, in like a browser. These are things that you want to reference later. Even if you're not using this stuff all the time, get some stars, connect with other students. I'm sure you guys have made friends with other people here in the course. Connect with other students, follow them, let them follow you, so that these categories aren't all zero. Because if you have 45 repositories, no stars, no followers, no following, it doesn't show like you're active as a developer, but you're also not connecting with others. So the stars are a great way to have quick access to other programs, but you have followers. I've only got a few myself and following.
You only put stars on your own repositories?
Actually, stars are repositories of other. So for example, like this is Google. This is Android testing. It talks about how to do test samples for Android stuff. So they've got a fantastic, and this is a pretty lengthy one, but they go into pretty good detail on how to get started, testing support library. So for me, having quick access to this, if I have any questions on when I'm trying to do some testing, I can quickly reference back to it. Like I said, it's kind of like a bookmark. And there's some really easy ways to find some of these. If you just Google like top trending GitHub C# or top trending GitHub HTML, Google will bring you back a ton of links, and you can go through them and, hey, you know what, this is really neat. I'd like to have access to this later on. Adding these stars allows fellow coders, fellow people see what you find valuable. But the followers and the following, I've included mine at the end of the presentation here. So if you guys would like, when you guys have access to this, connect with me. I'd love to connect with you guys and just start increasing all of our numbers. Everybody here should be connecting with everybody. This is something I think should have been incorporated a long time ago. But that's where we're bringing it up today. We just want to make sure everybody's taking full advantage of their GitHub. Any other questions from anybody? Yeah, go ahead.
If you've got a number of repositories, can you order them in any way?
Yep.
Or like old ones, especially when you're starting out, can look kind of maybe silly for an employer. Do you archive
Yep.
those? Do you hide stuff? Or
Great question. Since we have time, we can dive into some other stuff. Right here, customize your pinned repositories. So you can go in and select the top ones you want. I believe you can only have 8, I think is what it is. 1, 2, 3, 6. And then if you look right here, I can move them around. So if I want to have this up front, or I want to have, this, I can move it here. So I can put them in whatever order I want, and I can turn off viewing any of them I don't want. So now I'm going to show one. So really, really easy. It's just really taking time, guys, of getting on here, spending a little bit of time on it. I know everybody wants to get through the program and get, into job placement and looking for work and things, but taking the time on this just shows that you are, truly dedicated to this industry. I think over there was a question.
Yeah, just kind of a random question.
Sure.
Do you know how the minimum amount of commits you need for it to show up as red for a day, like an active day?
So I'll show you guys my. So I'm at 1,591. So when you look here, I've got 1 contribution today. I had 2 yesterday, 2 the day before, 2 the day before, 1. I've got some days with 6. I've got some really dark days. I had 32 on this day. Over the holidays, this was the 23rd. Was that Thanksgiving or the day before? I was doing a little bit of developing around that time. I took some time off for the holiday. So, I think my deepest one, I think I had 30 something one day. Just because I try to use VCS as it's intended. So if I'm creating something and then I want to make a change to it, but I don't want to break it, and mess all the code up, I'm going to save a version of it, and it's built right into the software I use. It sends it right up to GitHub. That version gets saved, and then I make the changes and I run it. And if I'm not happy with it or I broke it and I can't figure out, what it's messing up with, I can back out and go back to that previous version. So I'm using it as it's intended, and the advantage of that is I'm getting all these commits.
One more question, kind of on the same subject. When you're committing, say through Terminal or something like that on your local Git, does it update your commits for the day on GitHub, or do you have to actually push it?
I personally don't use Git. I know it's taught in the program. I'm a Windows guy, so I use the Windows version of GitHub to push things up, as well as my software to push it. I use Android Studio, but you can also use Visual Studio. It'll push it up. So I'm not exactly sure, but anytime that you make a change to a file of any kind in any repository, it counts as a commit.
Okay.
So they call it technically contributions as well, but it's any change to any file in that particular in any repo shows activity for that day.
Right, but it probably has to be pushed to the online.
Yes,
GitHub.
yeah.
Okay.
So if you're doing it all locally, like a local Git, and you're not pushing it up to actual GitHub, I don't know if it will count the days back that you haven't done it.
It does.
Does it? Okay, okay. I've just been doing it online for so long, I haven't done it the other way in so long, so. So there, that answers that for you. Perfect. But just make sure that they're getting uploaded at least at some point, so your activity is getting shown. I think over here there's another.
Yeah, I have a question. So I'm a graduate
Okay.
of the academy, but my niche is different. So the reason I took the boot camp is to be able to do API documentation. I'm a temp writer.
Okay.
And I've been doing it for 26 years. So how active should I be on
You know, that's a great question. I can do some research for you if you'd like. We can connect after this,
that would be great. Yeah.
and I can take a look.
I'm in the process of trying to clean up my GitHub.
Okay,
Some
yeah,
stuff on there.
I did have somebody recently, a recent graduate of ours, who got a job. He did video gaming with Unity, no, not Unity, C++, and he didn't have any GitHub activity, couldn't, because he didn't know how. And it took me 3 minutes on YouTube Googling it, just on YouTube, like, how do I do this? And I found him 3 videos I sent to him on how to, upload those files right onto GitHub. So there's a lot of resources out there. Just, Googling is the first thing I always recommend when you're trying to figure things out. As far as a writer goes, I'm not sure, but I'd love to figure it out with you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Kendra, can you see if there's any online questions?
There are.
There are, okay. Any follow-up questions? I mean, we got a little bit more time. We can open it up to any GitHub questions, at this point. Okay. Well, that's pretty much it, guys. Feel free to ask me questions after the meeting's all done, and I feel free to answer any questions for you guys. All right. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.